Okay, hi everyone, I'm Mr. Sherman Lee again, and I will be going through another essay question. This time it will be on the central problem of economics, which is scarcity. So this time I'll be going through just a part A question, so that I think this part A question really encompasses a lot of what we want to discuss on scarcity. So let's go through this question. There's no preamble for this question. It is simply just explain how economic agents' pursuit for self-interest can help to address the issue of scarcity. So the issue of scarcity is what? There are limited resources but unlimited ones. Right? So we have to tackle the idea of self-interest, the pursuit for self-interest, and how it addresses scarcity. So here, in my introduction, I'll shortly define what scarcity is, blah blah blah. But the focus on the key arguments, right? I think a lot of us will be very confused with how to do this question. So I'll bring us through this slowly. So when I talk about my key argument one, right? My key argument one, I'll talk about how for consumers and producers, right, in a free market, consumer and producer decisions are made based on self-interest. Make decisions based off self-interest. Okay, so here I would write, right, my consumer, I would explain how each of them maximize, or rather they pursue self-interest, right? So for my consumers, you realize that they aim to maximize net total utility. So they will consume until MPB equals to MPC, as every other economic agent does. But here, it's not just the MPB for consumers, this is the marginal utility they get from consuming another good, and the MPC is just the cost of the good itself. And for producers, you can see that they are profit maximizing, right? They try to maximize profits, and they do so by producing until similarly MPB equals to MPC, but here their MPB is their marginal revenue and their MPC is their marginal cost. So these two are concepts that we're very familiar with, especially for the producer side, because we've done a whole chapter on firms in J1, right? So here, I would expand a little bit on the producer side. I would say that to maximize, you see the consumers, right? They can't really change MUO or the cost of the good. They can't really control that. And for producers, maybe they cannot influence MR that much. But you realize that to maximize profits, producers will seek to minimize marginal cost of production. Minimize MCOP. So they will try to produce at lowest cost possible, right? So here, how does this address the issue of scarcity in my KA1? You realize that when they make decisions based off this, especially when producers make decisions to try and minimize their marginal cost of production, right? You realize that they will likely utilize more available resources. Why? Because, right, scarcer resources or scarcer FOPs, right, factors of productions, are likely to be more expensive. More expensive, right? Because when there's less of it, then it is likely to cost more for the producers to want to use a lot of it in production. And then here you will likely have to exemplify by giving an example of this kind of factors of production, and then we will link back to minimize their MCOP, right? They would likely choose the most abundant, cost efficient FOPs, so that they don't squander limited resources. So you see, I'm dealing with one part of the scarcity definition, the limited resources part, right? So they don't squander limited resources. And then you can see that for our key argument 2, right, this is where the bulk of the analysis comes in. how does the maximization or the pursuit for wanting to maximize self-interest help to deal with scarcity, right? You realize it is because it answers very key questions on what to produce, how much to produce, and for whom to produce for. So I'll break it down one by one. I'll talk about the what to produce, how much to produce, for whom to produce, and then I'll link it back to how it addresses scarcity. Okay, so when I talk about what to produce, right, the key idea I want to bring here is consumer sovereignty. You realize that as a result of consumer sovereignty, right, basically meaning that us as consumers, we have the ability, we have the choice to purchase what we want. You realize that we will use our money, to cast dollar votes on goods that on goods and services that we are willing to spend on, right? On goods and services we are willing to spend on. And this, right, you realize that as a firm, when I see what consumers are willing to spend on, I will produce the goods that you want because I want to maximize my profits, right? What's the point of me producing something that nobody wants? So here, profit maximizing firms will choose to produce goods and services which consumers are willing and able to spend on. Right? So here, so long, and when will firms do this? So long the price they can charge for it, or the prices that consumers are willing and able to pay for it, is greater or equal to their marginal cost of production, they will earn money from it, right? So long the price is greater or equal to the marginal cost of production, firms will produce it to increase their profits, to maximize their profits, and this helps to therefore determine what goods and services are produced. Now, we'll move on to the next question, right, which is how much to produce. How much to produce. You realize, right, now we're talking about the signaling role of prices. Consumers signal their desire to buy something, right, through how much they're willing to spend, correct? So they signal their desires to purchase, to their desires to purchase goods and services through the prices we are willing and able to pay, right? Through the prices, so this is the key, prices that we are willing and able to pay for the good or service, right? So what is the maximum price they are willing to pay? So you realize, right, that the max price they are willing to pay, right, is when the marginal utility they gain from consuming the good or service is equal to the marginal cost, and this marginal cost is the price, the price of purchasing, the price of consuming that good. So this is the maximum price that I'm willing to pay until, correct? So producers, on the other hand, producers also signal that their willingness and ability to provide the goods, right, at the prices they are willing and able to sell their good at for. So they signal their willingness and ability to provide goods and services through the prices that they are willing to sell their good for. So you see there's sort of an interaction, right? So long the prices that consumers are willing to pay matches the prices that producers are willing to sell, right, you realize that there will be some form of mutually beneficial transaction happening there. Correct? So the minimum price that producers will be willing to sell for, right? So we talk about the maximum price consumers are willing to buy for, but the minimum price they are willing to sell for is what? Is so long the price is sufficient to cover their marginal cost of production of the good. Okay? So here you realize that consumers are signaling, producers are signaling, so long both their signals match, some form of transaction will happen. Lastly, right, for whom to produce for? You see that I'm talking about the rationing role of the market. So you see, these are very familiar concepts in a way that we've all seen them before, but we may not be very clear with how to explain or discuss them, right? So I'll bring you through all of it. So long the maximum price consumers are willing to pay is greater or equal to the minimum price producers are willing and able to accept. Producers. So prod is producers are willing to accept, cons is consumers are willing to pay, right? So long this is greater or equal to that, you realize that mutually beneficial transaction occurs. Okay? But the issue, so where do I talk about the rationing part? But when you realize, right, that the maximum price consumers are willing to pay and the minimum price producers are willing to accept, right, you realize that for different consumers, they are willing and able to pay up to different prices. Similarly, for different producers, they are willing and able to accept different minimum prices depending on the individual firm, the individual itself, right? So firms only sell to those who can afford maybe at the market equilibrium price. On the other hand, consumers are only able to buy what they can afford. So you see, in some sense, right, can you make a logical intuition as to why this would solve the issue of scarcity? I have unlimited ones, but limited resources, right? So with the limited resources, I actually distribute my goods through the rationing and signaling role of prices in a market, right? Because due to the issue of scarcity, it is a fact that not everybody can get everything. So we need to have a way to address the issue. And actually, when we leave things to the free market, when we leave people to deal or to pursue their self-interest, right, we realize that it's actually quite efficient at dealing with it. Why? The pursuit for self-interest, right, helps in the allocation of scarce resource or helps with dealing with scarcity because it determines how and how much of a good to produce to satisfy the most wants. So I'll talk about the pursuit of self-interest, address scarcity, and then I'll elaborate on this, right? I would say that it determines not how, what and how much of a good or service should be consumed, should be produced to satisfy the most wants. What and how much. And while it also helps to determine who gets to enjoy the good. And this addresses the issue addresses limited resources, right? Because it is a fact that because of scarcity, not everybody can be able to get everything, not everybody can have their wants satisfied, not everyone, because we have limited resources, unlimited wants. So due to this pursuit of self-interest, as we've discussed, right, when consumers and producers work together, they can actually address the issue of scarcity to some extent by determining what resources do we utilize and how do we utilize our limited resources to satisfy the most number of wants, because it is a central problem of economics in the sense that it will never be fully addressed. There will never be an issue where we have unlimited resources and limited wants. So how do we, in a sense, mitigate, in a sense, resolve the issue as much as we can? So this will be the full answer to it. I'll give you about 5 seconds to take a screenshot of it. And generally, that's all we have. So hopefully, all of us are more confident with dealing with central problem of economic questions after this lecture. And if you have any questions, please look for your tutors for help. Okay? Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next lecture.